space science participant from the Johnson Space Center in Houston to discuss some about the upcoming CRS-7 mission.
Good.
First on the panel will be Joel Montalbano, our Deputy Manager for the NASA International Space Station Program from JSC in Houston. Vern Thorpe, the Program Manager for Commercial Missions from United Launch Alliance. Frank Culberson, the Space Systems Group President from Orbital ATK. Tara Rutley, the Associate Program Scientist for the International Space Station Program. And David Kraft, the Launch Weather Officer from the U.S. Air Force 45th Weather Squadron. And we'll begin first with opening comments from Joel Montalbano from the NASA International Space Station Program Office. Joel?
Well, good morning and welcome again to the pre-launch press conference. It's once again exciting to be down here at Kennedy Space Center on the eve of another commercial cargo resupply mission. I want to thank our ULA and Orbital colleagues for preparing the vehicles and get us to where we are today. We're looking forward to a great mission. Cygnus spacecraft will carry about 3,500 kilograms of equipment to the International Space Station. Highlights of that equipment, 1,000 pounds of utilization and crew research, about 1,000 kilograms of crew supplies, and about 1,200 kilograms of vehicle hardware. We're looking forward to a launch tomorrow, shortly after 11 o'clock local Eastern time, 11:11. And then we'll have a capture Saturday morning shortly after 6 a.m. Eastern time. The reason for the longer rendezvous is to clear the field for a Soyuz launch. We have a Soyuz launch out of Baikonur, Kazakhstan on April 20th. We'll have crew launching there. They'll do a 4-orbit rendezvous or 6 hours from launch to docking. We'll have a day in between, and then we'll bring in the Cygnus vehicle. So looking forward to a great mission. The vehicle's expected to stay just over 80 days, 85 days, I believe is the latest number. And so I just want to thank you for coming, and I'll hand it back over to you, George.
All right, thank you, Joel. And now to Vern Thorpe, the Program Manager for Commercial Missions from the United Launch Alliance. Vern.
Thanks, George. Good morning. I'm happy to be here today with all of you just over 24 hours ahead of our planned launch tomorrow. We're preparing an Atlas V 401 rocket to launch Orbital ATK's Cygnus spacecraft on the initial leg of its cargo resupply mission, bringing supplies, equipment, and science experiments to the International Space Station. OA-7 will be the 7th Cygnus flight and the 3rd time that Cygnus has flown on board an Atlas V rocket. It's an honor to launch this spacecraft, which has been named in memory of John Glenn. I feel like we're bridging history. John Glenn flew on an Atlas rocket in 1962 when he became the first American to orbit the Earth. And right now, we are actually preparing Atlas to begin flying astronauts again in the near future as part of NASA's commercial crew program. OA-7 will be ULA's 71st launch of the Atlas V rocket and the 36th of the 401 configuration. That 401 configuration has really become the Atlas V workhorse. That particular configuration has launched about half of our Atlas V missions over the years. This will be our 4th launch, ULA's 4th launch of 2017, and the 119th launch since ULA was formed in December of 2006. The Atlas 401 vehicle includes a 4-meter payload fairing, and many of you know that payload fairing comes in 3 different lengths. We're using the longest version for this mission, known as XCPF, that stands for Extra Extended Payload Fairing. Atlas V, as usual, is propelled by the RD-180 engine on the back end, and the Centaur upper stage will use Aerojet Rocketdyne's RL-10C rocket engine. And this configuration has enough performance capabilities so that we will not need any solid rocket booster strap-ons. Now I have a brief clip showing some of the processing activities that have gotten us to this point. I'd like to roll that if we could. So here you see our ULA Mariner arriving at Port Canaveral. This happened on February 5th. We brought in both of our stages, the Atlas booster stage and the Centaur upper stage. transported them a few miles down the road to our Atlas Spacecraft Operations Center, also known as the ASOC. When we get the stages there, we do some final checkout and some additional processing to get ready for launch. You can see the vehicle there in the high bay of the ASOC. And here we are out at the launch pad. We put the booster up on February 22nd. And that was when we were targeting the original March launch date. First thing we do when we go on scan with the vehicle is put the booster onto the mobile launch platform. And once it's secure, typically the next day, we'll bring out the Centaur upper stage. And one thing that we've started doing in the last couple of years is actually integrating that Centaur that you see there with the interstage adapter on the bottom and some of the other adapter structures on top. Each of those used to be a separate step when we made it out at the our vertical integration facility, but now we can do all that at one of our other processing facilities and bring that integrated stack out. So putting up the vehicle is really just a two-step operation. Once the vehicle is up, we'll bring the encapsulated spacecraft out. That's what you see here. That spacecraft transport and May operation occurred on March 17th, 2 weeks ago. And of course, once that's on top, you're about a week away from launch. We do some final integrated testing and checkout, and then we're ready for a final review and we're ready to go. And that leads us to the next video that I'd like to show you. This is a video showing the flight sequence that you can expect to see tomorrow. Can we roll that?
5, 4, 3. We have Atlas ignition. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. We have liftoff of the Atlas V rocket.
So Atlas V will lift off under the power of that RD-180 engine that I mentioned. That's actually it's a single engine with 2 thrust chambers, and it puts out a little less than 900,000 pounds of thrust at liftoff. That's enough to accelerate the vehicle to Mach 1 in about 83 seconds. We'll hit maximum dynamic pressure about 94 seconds. And then that will continue to burn for a little over 4 minutes, about 4 minutes and 15 seconds. At that point, we'll be out of fuel, we'll shut down the engine, the vehicle will be traveling about 10,000 miles an hour, and we will separate the Centaur upper stage with the payload attached. And then 10 seconds after that separation, we'll light the engines after we do some engine conditioning to get ready for that. That first engine burn will last about 13 minutes and 21 seconds. A few seconds into that, we'll separate the payload fairing that you saw right there. And that single burn will put the Cygnus spacecraft into the orbit that we need to get it to. We'll coast for a little less than 3 minutes, about 2 minutes and 49 seconds, orient to the proper separation attitude to separate the Cygnus. Once that's done, we will actually do another coast with Centaur, almost half an hour, and then we'll do a short burn, about a 12-second engine burn, and that burn is to do a controlled deorbit of the Centaur upper stage. And the Centaur will come down in the Arctic Ocean, a little south of Australia, just after an hour after liftoff. About, I think, 1 hour and 6 minutes they're predicting is when that re-entry will take place. So this morning, just to give you the final update, we did roll to the launch pad out of Complex 41 on our mobile launch platform. Final connections and some final checkouts are in work as we speak right now. And we'll load RP-1 propellant onto the booster a little bit later today. After that operation is complete, we'll secure the vehicle. This afternoon we have one more major review, and that's the final launch readiness review with the Air Force's 45th Space Wing. And after that, we'll let our crew get some rest. Very early tomorrow morning, some of our folks on the various teams will start coming in to pick up the countdown. And as was mentioned earlier, we're targeting about an 11:11 a.m. local time. That could actually shift a little bit because what we do for this mission is we actually update the trajectory if needed about 24 hours in advance to account for any last-minute changes to the space station orbit. We have that flexibility to really tailor the trajectory right down to the last minute. So with that, I'd like to thank all of our partners. As always, it takes an incredible team effort to get to this point. I'd like to thank the Air Force, the FAA, our customer, Orbital ATK, all of our suppliers who work with us. As always, we're relentlessly focused on mission success, and we're looking forward to a great launch tomorrow and continuing our record
good morning to everyone. On behalf of David Thompson and the entire Orbital ATK team, I'd like to thank you for the hospitality. It's great to be back here at the Kennedy Space Center Cape Canaveral complex. We've had great service and great collaboration with the folks here at KSC in preparing our payload and our spacecraft, and of course our partners ULA have done a great job getting us ready for flight. They've worked through a few issues that have delayed the original plan for the launch, but we're still on track for delivering to the space station and flying the SS John Glenn. We are very proud of that fact that this spacecraft is named after my former fellow astronaut John Glenn, a real pioneer, of course, in the space world, and as Vern said, who launched for the first time out of here on an Atlas rocket. So I think that almost 55 years ago, it's a great tribute to John to be able to take his name to orbit once again. We do have a short video that I'd like to play. If we could start rolling the video to show our processing sequence here. This is the service module arriving at Kennedy Space Center a couple of months ago. We're preparing it to mate it with the pressurized cargo module, which arrived separately. It's being uncrated in this scene. It came from Torino, Italy, manufactured by Thales Alenia. Some really great partners in building modules for space and for the International Space Station. Here they're being mated so that we can begin to load the cargo, and of course we'll host a number of science experiments. It's a fairly complex process. A lot of bolts have to be tightened and a lot of things put in place. But here you see it being moved from the processing facility over to the PHSF, where we'll do final loading. And of course, it's shrouded to protect it from the weather in this scene. And here we are beginning the cargo load, including the powered mid-deck blockers that we're carrying to the space station. We're carrying more this time than we have in the past, and that's a good step forward for us and for the crew. The more research we can carry, the more they can do their job, and the more they can show the utility of the International Space Station. A nice shot of John there in that previous scene. After it's loaded, we take it to the VIP, as Vern mentioned, for installation on top of the rocket. Sort of a breathtaking event in itself, but still one that they've done many times and one that we have a lot of confidence in. This scene is what you will see when the Cygnus detaches from the Atlas upper stage, and then we'll deploy the solar arrays, which of course are built by another Orbital ATK component in Goleta, California. These are our ultraflex arrays that have done a fantastic job for us on this spacecraft and on others. Once we berth with the International Space Station after our approach and rendezvous, of course the crew will first grapple the Cygnus spacecraft with the Canadian robotic arm, and then attaches to the Node 1 Unity node in preparation for unloading. The crew, of course, is always very anxious to see what comes up in the Cygnus spacecraft. This is from a previous one, of course, but we do think they'll be excited. We are sorry we missed Easter, but we're pretty sure they'll be excited about their Easter baskets or whatever great things International Space Station science put on board for them. More experiments for them to take part in, I'm sure. Once we finish our mission at the station and we load the discarded cargo, we will also conduct a couple more experiments, including a combustion experiment on behalf of Glenn Research Center, deploy some CubeSats and for planets, for nanoracks, and then of course there'll be an experiment to evaluate the re-entry of the Cygnus itself, which we've done on previous missions. And of course everything will burn up as it re-enters the atmosphere, right, Frank?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Like I said, we may be a little bit late, but we're happy to be coming Easter week and to see the excitement on the face of the astronauts. And there will be additional crew on board. I'd like to wish my colleagues, Piero Yuchikin and Jack Fisher, or Z-Fish, bon voyage and good luck on their flight on the Soyuz in 2 days. And they'll be arriving just before we do. And we look forward to the look on their faces as they I said, we're happy to be back here, happy to be flying again, and looking at any more flights in the future, but this is the one we're focused on today. Everything looks great, and again, we appreciate the great work by all of our partners, including, as Vern said, the FAA and NASA, who helped us get ready for this mission. And as I hand it back to George, I would like to also thank George for his 37 years of service in this job, and all the many interviews and conferences, like press conferences he's done like this, and all that he's put up with in having to deal with some of us that are forming space and trying to explain what the heck is he doing now. But George has done a terrific job of that, a real true fan of the space program, but also a real contributor. And we do appreciate all that he's done, and I'm pretty sure he won't go very far away. So George, thank you for everything.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. Sure has been working for a while. All right, next, Tara Rutley, the Associate Program Scientist for the International Space Station.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Like Frank, I share the sentiment that it's really great to be back at KSC. Watch the buzz about all the science that's getting ready to launch to station. Got to talk to a couple of scientists this morning, and they're ready to go, excited to be here. We have a wide range of support equipment that's going to be headed to station to support the science that's up there already, but also to introduce some brand new capabilities and some exciting new research to station. I'm going to share some of those examples with you today, but I could be here for over an hour myself. So in the interest of time, I want to make sure that you all are aware of our website, where you can go and learn a lot about many more of the investigations for station, and that's www.nasa.gov/ISS-science. So ISS-science, that's where all the science information can be found. So the first parts I want to share with you, it's pretty exciting, and it's real exciting to see Space Station keep up with the advancements in technology on Earth. It is a laboratory. We want to invite the best and the brightest, the most capable scientists to use that platform. And so the most interesting thing I think that's happening right now in terms of evolving science on station is all of the studies that are happening basically looking at our health at levels that you can't even see. So these are levels at the very tiniest cell and molecular biological levels. So one of those examples is a payload that is actually being developed, or was a winning student proposal, a high school student proposal. This one's called Gene in Space 2. Now, this student's proposal suggested to take a look at telomere length and how spaceflight affects telomere length. Now, telomeres are little end caps on the end of our chromosomes and our DNA, and as we get older, with every cell division, they get shorter. And it's associated with aging, and it's associated with also stressful environments, and it has impacts on our health. So this student proposed to take a look at telomere length and how spaceflight affects that by amplifying the DNA associated with the telomere sections. Now, amplification of DNA is a big deal if you want to go and study more about what's happening, as we see it in health. We actually were able to, for the first time ever in space, amplify DNA last year. I believe it was last summer. Again, another high school student proposal from the same program, Genes in Space. Amplification of DNA is an important first step, and then being able to sequence it to tell us what's happening in really. So we'll be able to see how this amplification process goes, get the data back, and maybe understand some of what might be happening with telomeres in space. Now, part of that also, Genes in Space 3 will happen later, a little bit later on, and we're going to be able to take the process, which is what scientists really do in the laboratory. Like I said, when you start with the amplification of DNA, then you want to be able to sequence DNA and tell you what you're actually looking at, what kind of protein are you looking at. So that's what's going to happen next in Genes in Space 3. We're going to combine two powerful DNA capabilities, analytic capabilities in space, and for the first time ever, take them from amplification to what are we looking at. And that's combining what we call the mini PCR with the biomolecule sequencer. That's a MinION product. Both are commercial products, and we're able to take things end to end, so inviting, again, more molecular biology studies in space, looking at lots of things that could be different in space flight. We also are, this particular launch is also enabling an investigation that is looking at contributing to fighting cancer using the microgravity microgravity environment to potentially fight cancer. This is a company called Oncolinks. They are working on what's called antibody-drug conjugates, and they've developed them on the ground. It's basically where you take, you combine an antibody with a drug and be able to target directly the cancer cells themselves to fight cancer. Now, this group is particularly interested in using the microgravity environment to test their process because in space you can, if you're really good at culturing, you can get some three-dimensional spherical cells developed, cell cultures of us on the ground. But to be able to do studies like that, you need to be able to grow really good cell cultures. And so the next investigation that is enabled by this particular launch is called magnetic 3D cell culturing. So this particular investigation will use magnetic cells that will be obviously levitated in microgravity, but used to control cells, hold them still if you think about it, when you need to, because growing cell cultures is very complicated on Earth. To do it in space is even more complicated because you have to feed them, you have to change the media, you have to keep the cells healthy, and that can be tricky in space. So this team is proposing to use magnets to basically hold your culture still while you do all those things to maintain cell culture. Now, what comes out of this could be very interesting in terms of new capabilities for all the different types of cells that we could potentially grow in space as we get more and more complex and we head towards more sophisticated studies. It's very complex in its systems. It's very capable, more capable than ever in the environment that the plants can grow in. It's got something like over 180 different sensors that will treat the plants the way they want to be treated so that they can grow food eventually for our astronauts as we plan to explore longer and beyond the Earth orbit. Let's see, what they're sending up on this particular flight is the structure and something called a science carrier. And this science carrier will have a couple different seed types in them. It will have dwarf wheat, I believe, and Arabidopsis. Now, wheat is a kind of a crop plant, right? Arabidopsis is a model organism plant that scientists can use. They know a lot about the genetics and a lot about how these plants behave. So this first set of seeds will be used as a demonstration of how we can wet these seeds and get germination of these seeds in microgravity in this new plant habitat where the environmental control can be precisely maintained exactly the way we want for studies, and then kind of let loose of the vehicle as the vehicle's coming in on reentry. And their goal of these 3 pods is to test new heat shield technologies for reentry into the atmosphere. One of those heat shield materials is a candidate for the Orion that we're developing here at NASA. But the 3 pods will also take telemetry data, looking at breakup conditions as well, and sending that information back to Earth to improve on future spacecraft reentry designs too. And with that, I want to say, again, there's much more that I can talk about, but if you tune in again at about 1 o'clock Eastern right here, you will be able to hear from some of the scientists directly. We have something called What's on Board, and each scientist will take turns showing off their hardware, showing images, talking in a lot of detail about these investigations that are headed to Space Station here, hopefully tomorrow. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
All right. Thank you, Shara. And now a snapshot of the weather for tomorrow morning. David Kraft, Launch Weather Officer from the U.S. Air Force 45th Weather Squadron. David.
Hey, thank you, George. I'm Dave Kraft again, U.S. Air Force meteorologist, one of the launch weather officers on this mission from the 45th Space Wing. So what we are looking at, as mentioned earlier, one of the activities that is going on today is MLP roll the pad, and as we do this briefing, it's most of the activities are firming up at the pad, and we have a weather team that is actually monitoring that operation, and everything is very favorable. Now, the meteorologist in me wants some really cool severe weather to talk about during this briefing, but I'll ask you're going to get the kind of a little decreased version of that briefing. It's not going to be very exciting, but again, climatologically, this time of year is generally very favorable for launch operations, and it's no exception for this week. We're actually looking at very good weather today, very good weather for the primary day of launch, and also for the 24-hour backup day. Now, if I can shift your attention to the video. What you're you're seeing, I have it cycling through several images. What you're seeing now is the visible satellite imagery. It'll go to a radar imagery. Here's your radar imagery. Now what you see on there, there's some green echoes, radar echoes offshore, kind of slowly tracking toward the land mass. That's going to be similar to what we see tomorrow. So some light, that green is rain showers. Now the infrared imagery, the colored enhanced clouds are deep convection. All that activity is well to the west, Texas, central United States, frontal system as well to the north. The visual satellite imagery is what you're seeing there, the brighter white clouds just off the spaceport. That'll be similar to tomorrow is what we'll see. We'll see a few isolated rain showers in the area. Some of those rain showers could grow to violate the cumulus cloud rule, but just the widely scattered nature of the activity, I'm not really expecting too much of a chance, and we'll get to the probabilities here. So getting to the forecast. So for the primary day, we're looking at easterly winds at 11 knots. Temperature range is going to be 75 to 76 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, the concern would be the cumulus cloud rule. Basically, that is a standoff distances based on the height of the cloud, the cumulus clouds. It could be a standoff distance of 10 nautical miles, 5 nautical miles, and then we have, there's a portion of that rule flying through the cumulus cloud. That would be the concern for the primary day. But the probability of violating the rule or any violation for primary day is 10%. So we're looking at so the probability of violation is 10%, so looking at a very good chance to launch. If we do see some violation in the count, probably will be on the order of 15 to 20 minutes and the shower will pass through. So it should be very nice. So for the 24-hour delay forecast, very similar, although tropical moisture is trying to creep into southern Florida on the backup day, but it should not affect us here in central Florida. So we should be looking at very similar conditions, maybe some just very slightly stronger winds into the mid-teens versus low teens for the primary day. And probability of violating is also, again, 10% with the primary concern, cumulus cloud rule. That pretty much concludes the weather portion of the briefing. Then back to you, George.
All right. Thank you, Dave. And we're ready now to take questions. Indicating your name and affiliation when the microphone comes to you, and we'll start here in front of the door.
Bill Hurley with CBS for Vern. Can you give us a little more detail on the hydraulic hose issue and what happened to you guys that kind of got in the way of the launch in March initiative?
Yeah, we were, I think the last time we talked, we were targeting a March 19th launch, and we had two hydraulic issues come up that we had to work through. One of them was on some of our support GSE, and the other one was on an engine component. So actually replacing those components was, it didn't take a lot of time. That's kind of the easy part. The harder part is doing a very, very thorough anomaly investigation to make sure that you understand, what happened to those components, why did they fail, and is there anything we need to do to make sure that it won't happen again. That took a little bit more time, but we did successfully get through that. I can't go into a lot of detail on the engine components themselves because of the proprietary nature of that data. But again, it was a GSE issue and a separate unrelated issue on the vehicle itself. So we had two back-to-back issues, actually three we had to work through, all related to that hydraulic system.
I understand, but I don't understand why it's proprietary with the hydraulic system, just to give us some general idea of what the problem was. Why is that proprietary? I'm not asking for facts and figures. I'm just trying to understand what broke. My understanding was quick disconnect fittings with bellows, and then you had some fatigue issues, and then can you please explain some of that?
Yeah, there was a hydraulic line on the vehicle. It was a return line that there was a small section that developed a leak that we had to replace. And then on the ground side, I'm not an expert in exactly what our hydraulic GSE looks like, but there was some sort of a return mechanism on that that had to be replaced as well.
Marcia?
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press. Vern, but I'd like to hear more about the camera setup for launch for the 360-degree view for live on TV. Can you explain, where's the camera, how's it going to work, how difficult was it to gear up like that, and how exciting is it to be able to do this?
I don't
this? Can you at least address that part?
Oh, it's great. I mean, to get in there and experience that 360-degree view, combining it with the, the Oculus Rift goggles and things like that, it really gives you a new perspective that we've never been able to do before. We've only been able to do that the last couple of years. Right back here.
Chris Gephardt with NASA Spaceflight. In terms of the delay when Cygnus stayed atop the Atlas, was there anything you had to do to accommodate any of the payloads in there or any of the late stow items?
No, we didn't have to make any changes. Thanks for asking. But we worked closely with NASA to make sure everything was going to be good to go all the way through April. They did some additional analysis, and so we didn't have to repack or stow anything. So it's still the same payloads. They're all in good shape. They've been powered since we loaded them.
And for Tara, in terms of the heat shield test you mentioned for re-entry, is that live telemetry downlink, or is anything going to be recovered from that?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure about that. I'll have to check on that and get back with you if you don't mind. Stick around afterwards.
Yeah, let's come up here. Ken Kramer, had a question.
Thank you. Ken Kramer, Universe Today, Northeast Astronomy Forum. For Frank and Tara. Frank, first, could you talk a little bit more about the personal meaning of John Glenn to you, okay, for this mission? And a lot of that work, Tara, was related to his work on the shuttle, the aging process. You discussed it a little bit. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more, whether this, amplify more on the aging process experiments you have, perhaps, on this flight. Thank you.
Well, my first exposure to John Glenn was when I was in, I won't tell you what grade, our principal let us go across the street to Henry's house to watch the launch of John Glenn on Freedom 7 in February of 1962. Very exciting day for me, and I remember thinking that would really be a lot of fun. I'd love to be a part of that. And so that was my earliest inspiration of actually thinking maybe someone in this country could grow up to be an astronaut, because I knew we were going to go further and faster, and we did. I followed John Glenn's career, of course, over the years. Met him several times. I was very excited when he came back to Johnson Space Center to train for his mission on the space shuttle. And he was fantastic to work with then. He and his family were great to have around, and I've seen him many times since he flew. I'm sad that he's gone, but he's lived a really full life, and he's provided inspiration to a couple of generations of American men and women. And I also want to point out that he's still older than I am now when he went back on the shuttle. So we'll see.
Wow. Yeah, so thanks for asking. So interestingly, with regard to aging, our astronaut population seems to represent kind of an accelerated model of aging, so to speak. That's how we kind of internally refer to it.
Really?
Yeah. you're doing okay, though. So. I think you're aging backwards. Comment on that. But with regard to this particular investigation that I mentioned earlier, this is going to be sending up a synthetic telomere set solution. And so the telomeres are at the end caps of your chromosome, and with every cell division as we get older, our cells are constantly dividing. Those get shorter. Those telomere lengths get shorter. So it's associated with aging. It's part of just who we are and how we age. It's associated with health, some cardiovascular diseases and such, when things go strange. And so this particular set is really just going to send up synthetic telomeres and look at how they heat them up on orbit, get the samples home, and just make sure the technology and the system is amplifying the DNA associated with those. So that first step in, and then us being able to take that further and study that molecular process of aging or stress or radiation effects, and what it might mean to our astronauts' health. And of course, it'll tell us something about our own aging process too. And the larger picture with our astronauts and the aging process, we look at things like impacts on the immune system. Some of the immune system is showing similarities to what we see in our aging population on Earth. So we develop studies that look at different sets of behavior in the immune system. so we can keep our crew healthy, but also bring that information back to us on Earth. The bones are the big ones. I think most everybody can relate to that. As we get older, our bones tend to get weaker. You know, we see things like osteoporosis. In our astronaut population, if they did no exercise and no countermeasures, no protection for bones as it is, they would lose bone mass at a rate of about 1 to 2% per month, which is more than that of a postmenopausal woman. And so we've learned over the past few years now how to combat the bone mineral loss and maintain density. We do know that there's still bone turnover in space, and that's normal for all of us, but even as we age, our bone will break down and rebuild, and it keeps our bones strong. But we have learned that if the crew keeps up their resistive exercise, their kind of weightlifting, so to speak, on orbit, and they take all the vitamin D, big doses that we give them, and eat all their calories, they're able to maintain bone mineral density, which is interesting, and it's a first. Now, we don't know yet about the structure of that bone because it's constantly rebuilding, but those are the next steps in research. And that's an example of information that you can take back to Earth and reiterate to the aging population here is keep up your resistive exercise, eat the calories, eat nutrition, take your vitamin D. As you talk to your doctors, some of you may have heard this before. We also think about, when I go back to the telomere study, you know, telomeres, I mentioned they shorten. Interestingly, the twin study that was done, Mark Kelly, when the Kelly brothers, Kelly was in space, Scott was in space, and Mark Kelly was compared on the ground, they looked at the telomeres for both of them, and interestingly and strangely enough, preliminarily, it looked like Scott's telomeres were actually lengthening, which is completely unexpected. And again, it's still preliminary, and the researchers are kind of scratching their heads at that. And so as soon as he stabilized on Earth for a little bit longer, the telomeres returned to where we would expect. So again, lots of interesting things happening at the molecular level. Aging-wise, there's a whole lot going on inside the bodies of the astronauts that we take advantage of working with the scientists to make sure that we gain information, gain insight into what's really going on so we can make sure that the public benefits here on Earth as well.
Thank you.
Right, we have a question right here.
Rick Lansby with WFIT. I guess this is a question for Tara regarding the CubeSats. Are they deployed from the space station or from the Cygnus?
Good question. So I think, let's see, so 34 will be deployed from the Kibo airlock on space station, and the other 4 will be deployed from Cygnus as Cygnus leaves, and it'll enter a higher altitude of about 500 kilometers, and those 4 will be deployed there.
Thank you.
So we have a question up front here on the other side.
Jim Siegel, I'm with the Celebration Independent and with Spaceflight Insider. A question for Tara about the advanced plant habitat experiments. I asked you about this a couple of times ago. I'm interested in what is unique or different about the habitat that is going up now. Will the astronauts consume some of the plants that are going to be grown? And do some of the plants come back to Earth for further study, or how does that work?
Okay, so the unique parts about the advanced plant habitat is it will be the largest production facility for plants ever on the space station. So it's going to be able to grow larger plants, and larger plants lead to things like food production, kind of crops. Initially, this will be used for science because we want to evaluate the efficacy of the hardware. So let's see, APH, the advanced plant habitat, can control different lighting conditions. It can control relative humidity, temperature, carbon dioxide exchange, let's see, and lots of other things I'm sure that the scientists know at a very detailed level. The watering system is controllable, and that's really important. And again, being able to grow large crops. Now, initially with the wheat and the Arabidopsis, we're going to look at them from a scientific standpoint. We'll want to return the samples so that we can study them and make sure that there's nothing interestingly different going on there with that habitat, making sure it's supposed to do what it's supposed to do. And then, the first science that's going to happen in November that's been awarded will be, again, a scientific study, I believe, using Arabidopsis, which is a model organism. And eventually, as we learn to understand how this habitat functions, I imagine we will evolve into crops. I don't know, and kind of edible foods. I don't know what the schedule is for this yet, though, and so I'm not quite sure when the crew is going to be allowed to sample them. I know when we went through the veggie system, the hardware system, the crew was not allowed to sample the first crop. It was supposed to return home, and it did, so that we can ensure, there's microbial communities that are part of plants and could be affected by microgravity, the nutrition levels. Scientists want to figure all that out before we just let the crew eat it. So I imagine it's going to be a little bit of an evolution on this hardware before. But I know when the crew eats it, it's going to be big news, because it always is. Lots of range. No free range after that. And no GMO, right?
All right, we have a follow-up question right here.
Chris Gephardt with NASA Spaceflight again, for Joel and I think maybe Frank too. The first question is, I think there was an EVA earlier this month that had to be delayed because there's a component on Cygnus that was needed for it. So I'm wondering what the preliminary timeline is for that EVA, assuming nominal berthing this weekend, and how much additional upmass were you able to get on OA7 by switching it to the Atlas V?
So let's see, on the first question, it was the express pellet controller assembly that was in this vehicle. And so right now we're targeting May 12th for the next EVA with Jack Fisher and Peggy Whitson going outside. This was, a risk that we had discussed when we were planning the triple EVAs from a crew standpoint, not really an issue. We'll just wait for the OA7 hardware, give the crew some time to get on board, get the new Soyuz crew on board, and but right now we're targeting for May 12th.
And I'm sure Peggy's really complaining about that.
Yes.
Extra time. But in terms of additional upmass on this one, we added about 300 kilograms to what we had originally been planning on this one. And we're continuing to increase our upmass that we can carry on both Antares and Atlas going forward so that we can keep up with the demand on the station. I also want to say I really appreciate all of you being here. Being able to continue to show what we're doing in space is really important, and you all make it happen. And I really appreciate the fact that you're asking questions about what they're doing in space and not just how we're getting there and getting back, because that's what really counts. And I also appreciate Dr. Rutley being here to answer all those questions.
Marcia, follow up?
Yes, Marcia Van AP, probably for you, Frank. Besides the banner with John Glenn's portrait, do you have any other Glenn things going up that might, pay tribute to him?
We have some memorabilia for his family, and as we normally do. And I do want to say that Annie Glenn is an amazing person, very gracious, very strong, and I really appreciate her giving us permission to use John's name on this mission. It meant a lot to us to be able to do that. Our team was very honored to be able to do that.
By chance, are any family members coming for the launch?
With the delay, I don't believe any of them were able to come, unfortunately. They're always welcome. We'll get them a ticket.
Bill?
Bill, again for Joel this time. Can you give us an update on when you think CRS-7 might be going for SpaceX ballpark?
Right now, late May. So we're looking at a May 31st launch and a berthing on June 3rd.
All right. James?
James looking forward today for either Frank or Joel perhaps. I just wondered if you could remind us why Atlas is the right vehicle for this mission, or what for any that you'll choose Atlas for, why you do that, and looking ahead through CRS-2, do you think we can expect to see roughly a similar breakdown between the vehicles, or no idea?
For this one, because there was a slightly increased demand for cargo to the station sooner rather than later, and Atlas had a vehicle available and additional upmass available, we talked to NASA and decided jointly to go ahead with the Atlas in early spring for this one. Antares is being ready right now for another launch at Wallops. It could go as early as this summer, depending on NASA's demand. And we, as I say, vehicle, so we like flying on that, but we certainly appreciate the partnership with ULA. On CRS-2, NASA hasn't actually told us exactly which missions they'll want on which vehicles, and that's part of the contract proposal we made to them, and so we'll wait and see which way they'd like for us to go, whether it's a mix or all one or the other. And we hope to hear that pretty soon. Right, Joel?
Yes, and I'll just add, having the opportunity to launch on different vehicles keeps our program robust. I mean, it's the ability to keep space station utilized, keep our crews busy, keep the science coming, keep the research coming, that having the multiple launch opportunities and the multiple launch rockets enhances that capability. So it's something we like seeing up all the time.
Ken, you had a follow-up?
Yes. For Joel also, and maybe for the others. Peggy Whitson's missions has been extended. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, and is there any
Progress anomaly late last year, when they sorted out and recovered from the anomaly and you laid out all the missions, there was going to be a 2-month gap this summer. That's partly due, when the Russians also, they went to 2 Russian crew members, from 3 to 2 Russian crew members starting with this upcoming Soyuz. So we worked with our Russian colleagues to look at having the extension of one of the USOS crew members, talking the benefits of the increased research in science, the fact that maintains EVA capability in the U.S. segment, maintains our ability to capture and unberth vehicles. It was just a win-win across the board. Peggy also has well respected by the Russian community, has a lot of experience, is another set of hands for them, and working with our Russian colleagues, we were able to extend her to September. So we're excited. You can't imagine how excited she is. I think the conversation of our win there, I'm sure when they didn't get the words out of their mouth talking about the extension, and Peggy was, I'm ready to go.
Over the moon?